Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we'll look at why and how Gabby's gamble on a fairy tale turned into a nightmare. Now, I've had a question, I've had it for a while. What does Brian do? Where does his money come from? What job does he have? What has been going on with him? And if you look at Brian's home, we've seen a couple of pictures of it, and I do find it quite strange how the reporters refer to it as Brian's home. Well, the reality is I don't think that is actually his home. It's his home, but as an adult, it's actually his parents' home. Not too shabby for a 23-year-old, but of course, it is quite shabby in the sense of if you living with your parents and you want to get engaged, well, you're going to have to find somewhere else to stay. You're going to have a job and a life and an identity and everything worked out. And did he? What was the next step going to be? And how many of those vehicles pictured in this image are Brian's? Did Brian have a vehicle? There's the sense that Brian didn't even have a phone, but if Gabby said to the police something about don't forget your charger, that suggests he does have a phone. So I do wonder day to day, what was the story behind Brian's finances? How is he earning an income, right? We do know that the pair had been living in Florida for 2 years, but they set off on their summer epic from New York on July 2nd after Gabby arrived on June 17th to attend her brother's high school graduation. I'm guessing her brother attended the same school she did. Now, one aspect that I think is underestimated, perhaps a little bit misunderstood, is the mechanism that caused them to go on this pretty long journey. It was supposed to be about 4 months, going from July, August, September this month, and only ending in October. It was going to be kind of a summer epic lasting the whole summer, lasting a full 4 months. What was driving this whole idea to escape, to get on the road, right? And it's not just a break, it's kind of prolonged escapism. They're going to sort of go from national park to national park, pretty much a solitary journey in some senses, and a lot of the pictures you just see them. And so I think this part is kind of being underestimated, is that they had been kept in a cage, certainly probably felt that way, due to the coronavirus pandemic, and this was their way of getting out of the cage and doing something different and trying to find a fairy tale within a difficult situation. And I think a lot of us are faced with this, but I think it's particularly fraught and difficult and challenging for the youth, for the young generation, for the young adults who at this time want to start their lives, start living their lives, and they're faced with this pandemic where things are locked down, closed down, stay at home, work from home, all that kind of thing. And there's a sense which makes complete sense for young people. They want to get out. They want to experience the world. And this was Gabby's response to that. And I guess to some extent, Brian's as well. And, this isn't just speculation. In the news site Newsday, it says that they had postponed their wedding due to the coronavirus pandemic and instead decided to embark on the cross-country camping trip. So the coronavirus also impacted their wedding plans, it looks like. So before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. And let's get started. So the couple departed on their cross-country adventure in her vehicle, a converted 2012 Ford Transit, a van with Florida license plate QFTG03. And I do think that is quite interesting because once again, one's got to wonder, did he have a vehicle? What assets did he have? If they were going to get married, how's that going to work? And so you start feeling a sense of illusions and ideals, perhaps becoming delusions and kind of dismay and depression. A young person going out into the world, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but then you might find that things are grayer and more drab and more difficult and harder and tougher than you expected. And some people respond to this in a different way. Some people are up for the challenge. Some people become motivated. They develop a work ethic. Others go into kind of a limbo. Others kind of feel depressed and sort of cycle about until they find their way. Now, Gabby described the decision to quit her job as a nutritionist at an organic juice bar to become a content creator as the best decision she'd ever made. Echoes of Shanann Watts saying that her husband was the best thing that had ever happened to her. In hindsight, was this the best decision she'd ever made? I know some people would say, that she did have potential and that it's doing very well now. But if nothing had happened to Gabby, if they'd completed their journey, would it have been a success? Would it have been the best decision? Or was a better decision to cut their losses, to cut the decision short? Perhaps they were running out of money, to go home with their tails between their legs, having failed, and try again with something else. It is difficult. It is a difficult life freelancing. It is a difficult life being a content creator. It may not seem that way. Certainly once you've arrived, it's easier. But getting there is certainly difficult, and it takes time. And if you a young YouTuber or a young TikToker, you might think, well, you might expect instant success, and it does happen, but that's the exception. And you need kind of exceptional skills, exceptional looks, exceptional luck in order for that to happen. So this is a quote from Gabby. She said, quote, "Downsizing our life to fit into this itty-bitty van was the best decision we've ever made." She also wrote, and she wrote that on Brian's Instagram page, those words, that was the best decision. With a limited space, we wanted to take advantage of every inch while also keeping everything minimalist. And so there is this sort of, that's the end of the quote, there is this sort of sense of trying to be cost effective and so on, but also taking advantage of certain situations. And they are trying to find a way to be effective in the world, trying to be efficient. And so how are they going to be doing that? Well, by driving around. That can be quite expensive. Driving around, perhaps not staying in hotels, but camping can also be expensive. You've got to buy your own food. It might be quite expensive for Brian, who is living at home and used to perhaps getting food at home. And also Gabby getting perhaps food or meals through the juice bar. It's difficult to say what is going on, but that suddenly then, being on the road is actually quite expensive. Every day you go somewhere is expensive. The further you go, the more expensive it is. So, but that was part of the dream, right? And they thought they could live cheaply, but it takes a lot of time to set up these accounts. It also takes quite a lot of time to edit videos and to put them up right. And that can also interfere with that whole idealistic sense of, well, we're enjoying ourselves. We're doing this for fun. This is enjoyable. Well, it's actually work. It actually needs to be work. And that might be quite a difficult distinction for one or both people to make when you're on this trip that is meant to be this sort of happy fairy tale fantasy, this adventure. Actually, it's hard work. Actually, you've got to plan your day. You've got to plan your content uploads. It's all actually quite contrived if it's going to be, worth anything. So to come back to what I said earlier, they intended to be on the road for 4 months. That's far too long for anyone to have leave in terms of work. So one wonders what Brian's plan was in terms of earning an income. It does seem as though for both of them, this was almost like a departure, that the 4 months were actually spent almost like an extended honeymoon, except it ended up being almost the opposite of a honeymoon, given what happened. There's an image on TikTok on the Nomadic Static TikTok account where I think it was for Valentine's Day. You see the couple by a waterfall, and there are the hashtags good vibes, Valentine's, love, hashtag travel, and then the song is Waiting Too Long, I think by Hippie Sabotage. And I think that's the feeling that they had, that they were waiting too long for their lives to kind of get going. They kind of wanted to get married and get on with their lives. And this trip was almost like fast tracking their lives, only to hit kind of a bunch of speed bumps. I do suspect that both needed to be far more prolific and polished on their social media if they expected to make a living out of it. So, they may have had this dream, this fantasy of the fairy tale of being a content creator, that you make a little video clip and then the rest of the day you sort of relax and kind of mooch around. And, you do a little bit of work and the rest is easy. The living is easy. And that is not really how it works. Certainly not to start off with. And so if the money did start running out, it would make sense for there to be a crisis of faith about whether to continue on with the adventure, to invest and commit or pull the plug and quit. And so I did see somewhere that apparently there was an argument, that someone witnessed an argument between Brian and Gabby, that they were actually arguing over their phone. And I wonder what that was about. Were they arguing about the content that she was putting up, or a comment that she was putting up? Was he telling her how he wanted something edited, or the whole packaging of the content, and that he didn't think it was to his standards or whatever it was? Bear in mind, there seems to be a design aspect to him, right? In that sense, he's quite creative, perhaps. But she's also got her own way of doing things. And so one can actually imagine that they may have had creative differences. And these tend to take a while to sort out. It's also a way that you might get to know someone. In Fight Club, you get to know someone by fighting them. And there are a couple of scenes in Fight Club where they say, which celebrity would you fight? And the one guy says William Shatner. Which kind of famous person would you fight? One guy says Gandhi. And also in the Matrix they say you get to know someone by fighting with them. You also get to know someone, and you get to know yourself by traveling. And it's often not a very pretty picture, because you take yourself wherever you go. You might want to escape, but you can't escape yourself. And if you going with someone who's a downer, who's in a bad mood, who's irritable, who's emotional, well, that goes with you wherever you go. And so, especially within the pandemic scenario, when you in these close confines, you can't now escape one another. You're stuck with one another. And now you've exchanged one cage for kind of a different one. And in some ways it might be worse. You might be dirtier more often. Someone else's bad habits you might be stuck with them in a way. I think Brian complained about we spoke about his dirty feet possibly bothering her, and also flies. Just makes one wonder who is more OCD between the two. I am going to be doing an analysis of the Moab incident broadly as part of tonight's live. It'll be tonight for me. It'll be 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for you guys, for a lot of you guys. And then I'm going to follow that up by going through it step by step, going through Gabby's statements and her body language step by step. I've just been looking at some of the analysis by other channels, slowly trying to absorb it, just so that I get a sense of who these people are and what is going on. And then I'm going to put my own spin on it and provide my own interpretation, but based on some of the insights, taking a leaf out of some of what these other folks have been saying. Some things I agree with, some things I don't. Dr. Matthias, I think, did quite a good analysis quite recently. I think his name's Dr. John Matthias. And then I know the body language panel, I think that's what it's called, they are also doing something. I just want to look at what they're saying and see what I agree with, what I don't agree with. So I'll also be looking at Brian. So I'll probably be doing 3 episodes, one on Gabby, one on Brian, and then when they come back to Gabby at the end. And then also looking at the way that the police respond to this. What about their response is good and right? What about it is not? What mistakes did the police make in the Moab incident? But I'll be talking briefly about that in tonight's live. And essentially that whole incident showed that the fairy tale was seriously fractured, that they were kind of like Don Quixote chasing windmills in terms of this whole social media adventure, that it wasn't really working. They were arguing about what they were doing. They were kind of arguing all morning. And what were they arguing about? They were arguing about a blog. And Brian was calling it her little blog, and basically seemed to not think that she could do it. And probably the right thing to do is to do it and fail, to do it, the whole thing from beginning to end, and perhaps fail. And then, but it's a little bit of a difficult situation when you're in a vehicle in that sense, because if there's an unwilling party, then how do you do something like that? And of course, so you have, in a weird way, almost a social media divorce within the context of an engagement, and that is what causes this crisis. They are in a relationship of sorts, and yet they are diverging in terms of this sort of career that they're embarking on. They've got creative differences, but that is the bind that they find themselves in. And this is one of the ways where a young person discovers that another young person might not be the right person for them. They get to know them through the anvil of the real world, actually testing the ideas out in the real world. And some of these ideas don't work. And sometimes these ideas need more time and more sweat and more effort and more self-belief. And whereas Gabby, I think, was gaining a sense of self-belief, I think Brian was losing it, but possibly because he lacked confidence anyway. And possibly what the dynamic that was going on there was that she was gaining confidence that she had anyway, and that was also a difference between them. So, of course, now the content is taking off, but for the wrong reasons, and now Brian is trying especially hard not to be part of the aftermath of the story that he started. Gabby has a Let It Be tattoo on her right arm, and her father described her as very, very free-spirited. But think about it. Was letting it be the right thing to do? Was it the right thing to head back to Florida, a failure, a social media flop, and unemployed, and go back to Brian's parents' home and start all over back inside the pandemic cage? Would that be the right way of letting it be? You tried, let it be, go home, start again, kind of thing. Or did Brian need to let it be with Gabby and let her go and let her do her thing and support her no matter what? Did he need to let her go, or did he need to let her do her thing and support her, even though perhaps it was difficult, perhaps they were struggling, perhaps he could have asked for a loan from somebody, perhaps he needed to kind of let her take the lead. And I know of a couple of accounts where there are a couple, I think the one is called Camp Spay Girl, where the woman is the focus of the content, and she models all sorts of beautiful locations, but it's definitely a effort between the cameraman, who seems to be a partner, and it works. But it does rely on the other person being in front of the camera. And would Brian have countenanced that? I don't think so. Brian seemed to be wanting to do it as a sort of a couple content thing, which in a certain sense is kind of boring. I think the other thing is that OCD and anxiety don't lend themselves to the vagabond existence. And I know about it. I've been a freelancer for most of my life. I've been a freelance photojournalist for most of my life. I've often stayed in hotels for free, but in exchange for making content. You don't make really any money out of that. You stay for free, you get a discount. It's great, but how much money do you get out of the experience? Not that much. So I don't know whether anxiety lends itself to that kind of existence. It can, if the anxiety spurs you on to work harder and work better and be more entrepreneurial. And I don't think being controlling or jealous or temperamental helps someone else in that situation. I do think the big question is about the money. What is the situation with the money? If money ran out, I wonder if something else ran out too. And I wonder if that thing is, whatever the thing is that fuels illusions. And I think one of the main fuels for things like psychological illusions and idealism is narcissism. There's healthy narcissism, and let's face it, social media can fuel it if you're getting traction. On the other hand, you can have your narcissism very badly dented by social media as well. And wasn't that happening to Brian? What do you think? So I'm not going to take it further than that. As I said, I will be doing a live stream a couple of hours from now at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be touching briefly on the Summer Wells case and then talking about the Moab incident, a little bit about the book that she was reading, Fight Club, some of the quotes from there, some of the psychology in that case. We're going to be talking about the cell phones and more about the psychology and the relationship dynamics of this couple. I may also provide you with some details about my trip that I've just done and some of the unpleasant experiences I had, because I also went on a trip recently. It was supposed to be this happy, fun, pleasant escape, and there were some pretty unpleasant things that took place that I haven't really let anyone know on social media, but I'll be doing it on tonight's live, so don't miss that. I'll also be taking some of your comments and questions, so I hope to see you guys there. It'll be a subscribers only live stream, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time later today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.